Good evening. Welcome to Rollins College. My name's Craig McAllister. I'm the president of Rollins College. It's my honor to welcome you here tonight for an exceptional evening of some of the work of one of my favorite professors at Rollins College. Sam and I have worked together now for over 20 years. He was 12 when he started. I was 10. But it's been a wonderful 20 years, and one of the things that Sam and I both have a passion for is management, leadership, and faith. And so it's been interesting watching his journey as he's written this book, watching some of the presentations he did. But what you'll get, and many of you know Sam, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know, is he's a wonderful Christian. He is an amazing family man. And he loves his students, and people that have had him as students speak about him often, and they speak about him warmly. And so when he started this project a few years to bring leadership and the thought of wisdom and connect it in a Christian way, it was just wonderful watching his thought process and how he put together an amazing book. So you're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to the man. And I want to welcome to the stage Professor Sam Certo. Sam?
Thank you very much. This is just like normal. He said it's all yours now. Thank you for coming tonight. This is a wonderful, wonderful event for me. This is kind of a highlight of maybe 5 to 7 years of my work that's been poured in. Some people say, how long did it take you to write this book? And then when I tell them about the things that I've been doing and to try to get it to this point, it's like, oh wow, you must be having a problem with your mind. But it did take some time to get things to the point where I feel good about them. And I see a lot of people out here who are supportive and friends, and I thank you all for coming. I would like to, first of all, think about the things that I've done and realize that there's an old saying that behind every man there's a good woman, okay? Well, I have to tell you something, that doesn't hold in my family. You think I'm in trouble, don't you? It doesn't hold in my family, because in my family, the woman is by my side or in front of me. And this is Mimi over here, so if you have a chance to say hello, we appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to move forward with this. We're going to talk about chasing wisdom. And one of the things that you need to know is, first of all, a little bit about me. Because everybody has biases. Everybody has problems with accepting some things, not accepting other things. You need to know where my voice is coming from. And I've been here since 1986, all right, as a professor of management. I've been in entrepreneurial kinds of situations. I have started men's clothing stores, been involved in internet marketing firm that has started with Matt down here, Matt Certo, one of my sons, and actually a restaurant called Eden, started by Brian over here. How many parents have adult children out here? Oh, look at that. How much would you pay to have 2 adult children sit right there and not be able to interrupt you for an hour? Huh? It's a pretty good deal. So there we are. But I am in a situation where my learning is not really for learning's sake. I'm seeing some of my students out here too. Thank you for coming. It's not for learning's sake, but it's focusing on practical problem solutions. And that's what I try to do with whatever I do. So when we talk about chasing wisdom, we're going to be talking about problem solutions. This is also going to be run a little bit like a classroom. I apologize for that, because that's sort of me, okay? That's sort of me. And when you look at this, the first three letters up here, TWA, that's not Trans World Airlines for some of you that have been around for a while. It's really teaching by walking around. And that's what I like to do. I like to have active pedagogy. I like to have conversations, and I'm going to promise you something, that by the end of this hour, you're going to be able to submit a term paper to me. Huh? And I'm going to ask you to do that. How many people have smartphones? Good. All right. So we'll get that all to work. All right, let's get into it. We have some people online as well, so we're excited to have them. There are going to be questions that we ask from time to time. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and we'll try to clarify whatever we can as we move along. Discussion in context. First of all, I want you to think about what I'm saying and the context for what I'm saying within the role of management, within the role of leadership. And Chasing Wisdom is mine, and the Academy of Management is a professional group. It's a professional group that really sets the standards for what people in our area are supposed to do. It has to do, gives you guidelines for teaching, research, practice. When you look at Academy membership, one of the things you find out is that there are about 18,000 people in the Academy that try to move learning in an appropriate fashion. This right here is called an emeritus. Anybody know what emeritus is? What's an emeritus, professor? I'm getting a lot more respect for emeriti professors, I'll tell you that right now. So here we go. One of the things that's recommended by the idea of the Academy of Management has to do with spirituality. And when we look at spirituality, it becomes an important issue for us. Would you mind reading the words in white, please?
The study of the relationship and relevance of spirituality and religion in management and organizations.
Thank you. So when we look at that, when we think about the role of what we're trying to do here, we're trying to come up with a match, an integration, a mix of both spirituality and business. And that's what we're supposed to be doing at Crummer, a graduate school of business. This is a topic that should not be excluded. It should be included and integrated. Thank you for coming in. How are you? Good, good. I'm thinking, is it Bob Euchre that has those seats usually? I must be in the cheap seats? Yeah, okay. All right, so when we look at this then, we're looking at Chasing Wisdom as being consistent with the advice that we're given through the Academy. All right, let's get into the idea of chasing. Chasing is the first word in this title. What do we mean by chasing? Chasing. What does chasing mean? Anybody want to start? Going after? Who said going after? Thank you, Susan. So when we look at the idea of going after, we're talking about we're pursuing something for a benefit. Now, maybe if you're the zebra, you have some different definition of chasing. But if you're the lion, you're certainly looking for some benefit. Owusu, that might be an African proverb. I'm not sure. So when we look at this then, we're saying, okay, what we want to do is pursue wisdom to become a wiser leader. Wiser leader. I use a capital R, and I stress that very much so, because all of us in here are wise to some extent. What we're all trying to do is to be wiser. And in the movement for this, we need to realize and recognize that this is a marathon and not a sprint. It's something that you'll do over and over and over again in an effort to improve. Okay, the first thing that I'd like to ask you, we're talking about chasing. We're talking about chasing wisdom. This is the cover of actually a new book that's just out. And when we look at this, that cover is supposed to tell us something about the chase that we have. What does that cover tell you about the chase? What does it tell you about the chase? You know what I'm going to let you do? I'm going to let you pick somebody next to you. I want you to pick the smart person, though, okay, because you want the right answer here. I want you to pick somebody next to you and give you 30 seconds to come up with a characteristic of that cover that tells you about the chase. Ready, go. Okay, time's up. What are some of the what are some of the quick characteristics? Quick characteristic.
Endurance.
Endurance.
He doesn't have his eyes on his shoes. He has it on the horizon.
Meaning?
Perspective.
Perspective. You need some perspective in doing this. Characteristic.
No clear path.
No clear path. Trying to find out. Very, very thoughtful in terms of what's going on. Characteristic. Long journey. It's not something that's going to take place easily. So we look at all of these things and we start to say, okay, that's the journey. We're willing to get on this journey. Now what we want to do is to define what wisdom is. Wisdom is insight about right and wrong in handling difficult problems. Anybody here want to hazard a guess at how long it took me to make this definition? You don't want to know. You don't want to know. If you go to the literature, if you go to the dictionaries, you look up wisdom, half of the definitions make it necessary for a wise man to interpret them. And it's not really something that becomes practical. My whole journey was, how do we do something that's practical? Well, the first thing that's a key is insight. Wisdom involves insight, okay? That's what we're looking for. What is the insight about? Hi, Tom. Insight has to do with handling right and wrong issues to solve difficult problems. Now, insights. Remember, this is a key word in the definition. You probably remember from a while back that as you go through definitions, then you have to define what's in the definition, right? Okay. So when we look at this now, what are insights? What do you mean by insights? Insights have to do with knowledge that defines the true nature of the situation. Knowledge that defines the true nature of a situation. Remember what we're doing. We define wisdom. In order for us to garner wisdom, we have to look for insight. That insight will give us what? Knowledge about the situation, the true situation. Example, I used to work in a men's clothing store. I used to supervise, actually I guess I used to say stock man, maybe it's a stock person now. But the stock person would bring different types of clothing to the floor, and we would put those on sale or not, and he would straighten the items and do all different kinds of things with the clothing. Well, he was very, very responsible. He was someone who really, indeed, stuck to the assignments he was given. But one day, he didn't come to work. He didn't come to work. It was not very typical. The next day, he didn't come to work. Again, not very typical. He didn't contact me. The third day, the same thing happened. Now, some might respond to that by saying the true nature of the situation is that this individual needs to be fired, reprimanded, or whatever. Okay? But when you look into it and you start to think about it, what caused the person not to come in? Maybe the person was hit by a truck. Maybe the person is incapacitated. Maybe the person is in a circumstance where he can't communicate. All of these things add insight into the true nature of the situation. When you get that insight, you're more prepared to make what? Ideas about what you should do. Now, insights come from a lot of different sources. Insights come from Confucius. People reflect on what Confucius has to say. People reflect on Sun Tzu, a warrior, for insight. How many have read Sun Tzu? Okay. The whole idea is, what do you do in the military? And that should help you out. Insights. The Torah, the Holy Book of Judaism. The Quran, Islam. And the Bible for Christians. All of these are sources for insight that various people use. Now, I want to tell you about my personal academic and business journeys. What I have found is that reliance on biblical principles as well as business principles enhances the value of what the leader has to offer in a circumstance. So chasing wisdom has to do with trying to be wiser over time, but also how do you focus on the idea of blending biblical and business principles. What's the business side? How many Crummer students are here? All right, thank you all for coming. Does this look like your curriculum? It pretty much does, doesn't it? Okay, on Monday I go to marketing, on Tuesday I go to operations, accounting, finance. I learned all of these things. All of these things. All of these things that I would call the technical side of business. Some of these guys call people the soft side. I don't do that. I call it the people side, not the soft side. But this is what some might call the hard side or the technical side of business circumstances. You need to know these principles to survive in a business setting, right? Okay. Now, this is the set of principles that comprise the people side, comprises the people side, this set. And when we look at this set, one of the things that becomes important for us to know is that I like to use the illustration of Bill Gates and talking about Bill Gates and saying, do you think that Bill Gates would have hired anyone at all if he had been able to accomplish? Hi, Colin. How are you? Good to have you here. All right. So when we look at the idea of the people side, we're saying here that Bill Gates would probably not have hired anyone to help him had he been able to pull everything together. Why do that if you can accomplish it yourself? You can't accomplish it yourself. You do need people. You do need people ideas. And what I find is that these comprise a useful set of principles to use in organizations. Handling anger. Who got angry today? Anybody? No? Yeah, good. Listening. Gathering information, gathering feedback. Okay. Self-discipline and disciplining others. One of my favorite topics is heart. How do you build heart? How do you build your own heart? Okay? How do you build somebody else's heart in a proper fashion so that they act in a way that's appropriate, given organizational circumstances? Good and bad pride. Trusting one another, being just. The impact of words in communication. Where are students in the principles of people? Unleashing people. Anybody from that OB class in here? No. Too long ago? Essentially, these are some of the ideas, right, Craig? They're taught in OB. These aren't necessarily things that are controversial, but they're all people side and they're all business issues. Okay, essence of the book. The book is built upon the fundamental principle that we need to problem solve. All of us have problems. We need to problem solve in organizations. That's the fundamental principle here. You do that by building insight, and that insight gives you knowledge about a circumstance that you then try to apply to solve a problem. So all of these things fit together. At the bottom, it's built upon, actually the citation says Proverbs 9:9, Would you read that citation, please?
Instruct a wise man, and he will be wiser still.
When you think about that, and you think about the issues that are involved in the book, and things that I talk about in the book, you know what? You could take away the biblical reference if you wanted to, and say, instruct a wise man, and he will be wiser still. That's what the whole notion of this book is about. Building wisdom, moving forward with it. I would like to give you a very short period of time to list with your partner. Maybe you need a new partner from last time, I think maybe. But anyway, to list with your partner one organizational problem that you would like to solve. You have about 30 seconds to do this. Ready, go. What?
They're 15 online.
Okay, good. Is somebody doing the microphones out here? It would be nice to be able to speak in the microphones, but don't worry. Okay, all right, time's up. Problem.
Getting people to take full responsibility for what they're assigned to do.
Okay, very good. Getting people to take full responsibility for what they're assigned to do. These guys are coming out here, Trez coming out here. Put that up to somebody and ask them their problem. Don't look for a volunteer. Move.
Am I next? Our problem, because we're a group here, is communication upward to the boss.
Fine. Upward communication. Problem. Very definitely. Problem.
Motivating your workforce.
Awesome. Motivating workforce. Problem.
It's already been taken, but yeah, motivating your workforce and how you keep them accountable.
Okay. Motivation and accountability. One more?
Accountability in finances and accounting.
Okay. Accountability, finances. Okay, so when you look at these things, how many people have in their organization a problem similar to one of the problems you heard? Yeah, they're pretty much out there, aren't they? They're pretty much out there. So when we start to look at these things then, wisdom will help us to start to say, these are our problems that we have. Now we need to look for insights about right and wrong in solving those problems, and we need to implement in some fashion. Okay. The theme of the book is this. Would you read the theme, please?
The better a leader becomes at blending business and biblical principles to solve problems, the wiser and more successful a leader will be.
Thank you very much. So the whole concept, the whole notion here is that we need to blend these two together, and the better you are at blending, the better a problem solver you're going to be. The better a problem solver that you're going to be, the wiser that you will be. Let me tell you about how this book started. I'm a professor here, you know that. I've been studying the literature for a long time. I've been writing for a long time. I have books in 14th edition, books in 8th edition, things that have been moving over time. And I study the literature in order to make them contemporary. While this is going on, I also do my personal study of the Bible. You know what I find? I find that we are already teaching in our school subjects that have biblical underpinnings and biblical thought associated with them, although we don't associate it with the Bible. What are some of these things? Ethics. We teach a course in ethics here. Very important course for us. Social responsibility. How do we improve society while maintaining the goals of the organization? Philanthropy, sustainability. A few years ago, sustainability wasn't even something that people thought about. But now, sustainability has to do, how do you manage your organization so that you don't use up resources and future generations have nothing to use? Sustainability. The whole point here is that there are parallels between the two bodies of principles. And when you think about them, the whole purpose of this book is to magnify them, not to dilute them, but to magnify them and to go into more depth about them. Okay, one of my favorite topics, confluence. You remember confluence, don't you, Adam? Adam knows confluence. Adam, what's confluence?
I think it's something about
Something about those rivers in Pittsburgh. That's right. Very good. That's very good. You're going to see what Adam's talking about in just a minute. Anybody from Pittsburgh here? Oh, okay, Pittsburgh area. So when we look at confluence, it's a flowing together, a coming together, and this is Three Rivers, the Three Rivers area in Pittsburgh, right? Now, whoops, wrong deal. When you look at this, the Allegheny is on the left. I hope I have these right. Is that right? The Allegheny's on the left? All right, perfect. So the Allegheny's on the left. The Monongahela is on the right. This is, I think, Three Rivers Stadium where my team, the Reds, was beat a lot over time. But anyway, it's no longer there, so it's an old picture. But this area is called the Ohio River. Now, when you take water from the Ohio, can you tell which river it's from? You can't, can you? You can't at all. But yet some is from the Allegheny and some is from the Monongahela. Now, what does this have to do with leadership? Well, if we look at this in terms of what we're talking about, chasing wisdom, if we look at the idea that on the left we have biblical principles and on the right we have business principles, and what it ends up in when you integrate them is what? It ends up in wiser leadership. That becomes the issue. So we're not in the business of dividing things. We're in the business of integrating things. So we want to integrate business principles with people principles, which are mainly, in this case, issues from the Bible. This is another way to say it. This is another way to say it. This is a crossword puzzle. And when you look at it, can you see the technical side of business up here? Sure you can. Sure you can. Operations, I hear it over here somewhere. Okay, operations, marketing there. Now, look at the link between operations and strategy. What's the link? Trust. Trust. How do you build trust into your operations system so that people will maximize their effort and want to obtain their effort, and at the same time build a strategy that they can trust to move them forward? When you start to think about these things, all of a sudden you don't do strategy. You do strategy and trust. And when you do strategy and trust, those two should be seamless. They should be seamless in terms of what happens. Let me give you an example. The main issue that we're talking about is to solve problems. Probably the most difficult thing to do for people, for leaders, is to define a problem. Without a true definition of a problem, you've heard this before, haven't you? You heard this before. We have a class where people write problem after problem after problem and revise and revise and revise until we get something that is focused and directed. And when you think about this, it's different than a symptom. If you go to work one day and you see that there's so much horseplay going on, people talking back and forth, people doing things that perhaps are not as productive as they could be, the issue might be, let's think about this and see what the issue really is. What is the problem here? Once you define the problem, then you can think about ways to solve the problem. Let's say that you determined that this horseplay that was going on was the result of ineffective incentive programs, and that people didn't feel as though they were getting any kind of return at all, or maybe not a fair return, for the effort they put in. Okay, so there's our problem. The solution to this problem is keeping productivity high by rewarding people for doing good work. Is that controversial? Steve, is that controversial? There's nothing controversial about that at all, is there? It's good, sound management logic, leadership logic. Okay, now, let's look at the people side of this. Let's look at the people side of this. When we're thinking about and issuing, what's the biblical insight for this problem? Would you like to read this first, please?
Don't pervert justice. Don't show favoritism to either the poor or the great. Judge on the basis of what is right.
Okay, thank you. So when you look at that verse, what it's saying, it's pretty common sense, isn't it? I mean, it's there and it's straightforward, and again, you could really take away the verse reference if you wanted to. And in the world, in the business place, this would make a lot of sense. So it doesn't make sense to exclude it, does it? It doesn't make sense to exclude it at all. So we're saying, okay, that's the people issue. Now, when we look at these two together, what's the key word? Confluence, right? Confluence. So when we look at these two together, we're trying to put both of these principles together, right? Integrate them. What does this mean? Well, here is the wiser leader principle. The wiser leader principle. Nyasha, would you read this, please?
Keep productivity high by rewarding people, but do not show favoritism in giving out rewards.
Okay, so now we've blended the two, haven't we? We've blended the two. We have an issue of keeping productivity high by rewarding, but at the same time, not only rewarding, but trying to do what? Not show favoritism. Not show favoritism at all. How many have seen the movie Aaron Brockovich? Oh, good, good. Who can do a setup? Can you set up Aaron Brockovich for us? Set up the movie? I got to tell you something about this guy. You know why I called on him? He drove over me in a golf cart on a golf course. Is that right, Mike? Yeah, that's true. That's right, just the way. So when we look at it that way, Aaron Brockovich is somebody who is a legal assistant of a sort, not an individual who is a lawyer, an individual who indeed had a movie that was done about her life. She actually did the research into a law case that wound up in a monumental settlement, and people were given money as a result of that. The idea here is monumental against a utility. All right, now, I want to tell you something more about Aaron Brockovich.
her through this in person. You know, there's some things I want to show her, visual aids and documents and stuff. So if you could just tell her I won't take up too much of her time. Right. Well, it's a little more complicated than Hinckley, so let me do that. Well, tell her I'm not a lawyer. That may help. Great. Why don't you just give me the address now, just in case? Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks so much. Bye. Oh, what's up?
I have your bonus check.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Now, I want you to be prepared. The figure's not exactly what we discussed.
Why not?
Because after careful consideration, I felt that figure was not appropriate. Although you may not agree, you have to trust my experience and
Trust?
judgment.
You want me to trust you? Do me a favor, Ed. Don't use big words you don't understand.
It's a complicated issue, Aaron. You're not
I did a job.
lawyer.
You should reward me accordingly. It's not complicated. You know what? That is the problem. All you lawyers do is complicate situations that aren't complicated. Do you know why people think all lawyers are backstabbing, blood-sucking scumbags? Because they are. And you know, I cannot believe that you were doing this to me now when I'm up to my enketlement plaintiffs, which, by the way, looks like it's going to be double the amount that we had in Hinckley. And you expect me to go out there, leave my kids to be looked after by strangers, knock on doors, get these people to trust you with their lives, and the whole time you're screwing me. I want you to know something, Ed. It is not about the number. It is about the way my work is valued in this firm. It's about how no matter what I do, you're not...
As I was saying, I decided that the figure you proposed was inappropriate, so I increased it. Do they teach beauty queens how to apologize?
Is that great? Is that great? I'll tell you, if I were an actor, that's the line I would want to use. Do they teach beauty queens how to apologize? We have lots of things to talk about with this very brief example, and issues regarding fairness. In this case, it was not perceived as being fair, but because there wasn't full information, it was overboard, perhaps, on fairness, or at least fair, and not being able to be judged as being fair. You can also see and hear the body language that was used and her disdain for any lawyers in here? Where are my lawyers? Colin, raise your hand. Lawyers in here? Uh-huh. Yeah. So anyway, this is the way lawyers really are, right, Colin? Okay. Now, let me give you a quick summary of what we're doing here, then we want to open a little bit for questions. And tonight's message. We have focused on getting to know wisdom a little bit. We know wisdom because wisdom is insight about right and wrong in handling difficult problems. And once we know that, then we can focus on confluence. We can focus on how do we get biblical thought and business thought together to use in a positive way. The other thing that we've talked about tonight is that becoming wiser is a marathon. It is not a sprint. If you're looking for a bag of tricks that you can play with people to manipulate and to get things done in meetings, or how to start this meeting, or how to close out this one, if that's what you're looking for, this isn't the book for you. This book is to think about building yourselves as wiser leaders, and a process for for doing that, and a process is outlined for doing that. The other thing that we need to look at here is to define problems very clearly. Don't gloss over that. Don't gloss over that. It's easy to say, okay, yeah, we want to define problems. That is a difficult thing to do. Because in the problem that you define, there should be some innuendo about what you're going to do to solve it. If the problem is an incentive system, then the innuendo is we need to change that incentive system in some fashion. Behind the eyeballs, I use this phrase because so many managers that I talk to, it can get frustrating because they always see problems from the eyeballs out. And you know what? A lot of the problems that they face are from the eyeballs back. And there's a big difference in that orientation. What am I doing wrong? What are my strengths and weaknesses as a person? And how do I move in that direction? Seek instruction. Remember, we talked about seeking instruction and how one of the proverbs we talked about said that instruct a wise man and that man becomes wiser. Man becomes wiser, okay? Think about your chase, and I'd like to hear about your chase in some fashion if you decide to study in this regard. All right, here's my favorite part. It's time for your term paper. Time for your term paper. Get out your smartphone, okay? Now, how many of you would have loved to have had a term paper that was one phrase? Huh? I'd like for you to send to Certo@rollins.edu a phrase that is your most important point that you learned tonight for becoming wiser. Okay? Send that phrase. No cheating. Microphone. Good. Melissa. Where's Melissa? Patience. Good. Scott. Where's Scott? You get a reward. What is yours, Scott? Confluence. You know, here we go. This is my adult son. Hi, Dad. The game is in 20 minutes, and the dean wants to watch. Is that right? Is that what you told him? All right. Anyway, thank you for that. There is a saying by Confucius that if you chase two rabbits, both will get away. How many have heard that statement before? It's a pretty important statement. As I was growing up, I raised chickens, and so I could change it to chickens, and I understand what's going on here. But the whole idea is find one thing that you want to do and do it right. Find one thing you want to do and do it right. Okay. Why don't we, how do you want to open for questions here? Go for it? All right. Let's talk about some questions that you might have for tonight and see if we can. And we also have some people online. Would you bring that up? What kind of questions do you have? Any questions, comments, concerns? Here's one right there.
We talk a lot about accountability, and in our business, I find quite often, I mean, we do integrate biblical with business. We pray at every meeting, you know, before every meeting. But the accountability piece, there's a lot of, I guess we find a lot of our salespeople have this sense of woe is me, and they really don't want to be accountable and follow through. We can educate, but they have to execute. And we have a lot of challenges with that.
So when you think, is accountability something that people want? I think some people really don't want it, but I think there are others that do. And that sometimes when people don't respond well to accountability, they don't see accountability as a means to an end of betterment. And not a gotcha kind of a situation. I'm not saying this is your circumstance, but it's not a gotcha situation. It's not a situation where, aha, you should have done this and you didn't. I like to talk about it more as a team building issue. And if you can think about accountability as a team building issue, and one of the things that is in the book is that the wise person is one who is ready to roll up their sleeves and do the hard work of getting along with people. And accountability has to do with getting along with people as much as anything else. Does that help? A little bit? Okay. There's a question down here.
First of all, thank you so much for this wonderful session, I must say. It was really enlightening. When you wanted to start writing this book, was it one particular moment that made you decide that I have to write this book, or was it a series of events that made you write this book? What was the trigger behind, coming up with this idea and write this book?
That's a good question. It's a fair question. The reason for doing this book really has evolved over time. And that anytime somebody does a project like this, if it's going to be worthwhile, it's going to actually reflect the person. And I found that over time, I have changed as well. And if you compare something I wrote in 1980 versus what I'm writing now, there's a big difference. And as I started to develop with the academic writing and integrating the issues that were biblical, and I started to feel my philosophy changing, it just seemed like a normal thing to do. And I think it seemed like a more powerful way of being practical and helping people. Yes?
I was just going to say, according to the accountability, would that be a symptom or a problem that the salespeople don't want to be accountable?
Well, it might be, it's a good question, it might be a trust issue. And people may not trust individual X, and as a result of that, don't want to be held accountable because of the trust circumstance. Maybe there's favoritism that people perceive. So until you really get behind, the things that are easiest to see are usually symptoms, aren't they? The things that are easiest to see. Think of the medical model. When you go into a doctor's office, the first thing the doctor says is, how do you feel? What hurts? What's the temperature? Things like that, moving along. But that's all data that's easily gotten. That's not the problem. And usually the problem is well beyond what that set of symptoms might be. You're absolutely right. So you have to look into that, and that's what we're talking about, defining problems in some way. Is there an online question?
Dr. Certo, a big part of leadership is mentoring leaders on your team. Do you have advice on how to train others to be leaders?
Mentoring is so important. It's important because it's a way of building your corporate culture. And that it should be right up at the top in terms of one of the things that you would like to do in your organization is to somehow mentor. But you mentor not just through advice and counsel. You best mentor through your own actions, your role modeling. Absolutely. So when you think about this idea of mentoring and building leaders, I think that becomes a very important thing. That you need to build those leaders. Mentoring is a wonderful tool to use in that regard. And in addition to that, you need to keep thinking about circumstances where you can role model and show people. Another one?
There was a reference to a girl named Cindy at Eden's in your book. She looked great on paper, but her interpersonal skills were lacking. How did Brian deal with that situation? Did he use forgiveness, discipline, or both?
This is the guy that wrote me, Dad, it's 20 minutes, so we got to get you. The circumstance that was dealt with there had to do with the idea of forgiveness and grace. And that people are saying that we need to be merciful, okay? And you need to be merciful in an individual trying to do something that they're not able to accomplish. But the key question is, how much mercy do you use in an organization? Because there's also another issue in an organization called justice. If you are merciful to the point where other people in the organization are being, what? Are being hurt in some fashion, then mercy probably has gone too far because you're being unjust. So, and this goes back to the idea of accountability. Mercy does not say that you simply wash the board clean. It doesn't say that at all. And in this kind of a circumstance, actually it worked out and the employee made it through. Okay? Okay?
Thank you, Professor. Very wonderful presentation. We serve with Cru, formerly Campus Crusade for Christ. And how would you apply the knowledge and wisdom of this book to an organization like ours that's to fulfill the Great Commission, and to all of us to be an active part of the Great Commission?
I think when you look at who this book is intended for, it's people that try to build organizations. And when I look at the history of some of what Bill Bright has done, he has done that by building organizations of people, an organization. And I see some other people from Cru. How many Cru people are there here tonight? Okay, very good. So that you're fulfilling the Great Commission, but that does not take away the issue of influencing and having people relationships that then multiply the way in which you work together. So it's a team process. And I think that when you look at that these ideas, these concepts, fit very nicely into an organization like that, into a for-profit organization, a not-for-profit organization, into a family organization. The same ideas of trust, handling anger, okay, good pride, bad pride, all of those things come to the surface when you're trying to build that synergy among people. Does that help? Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
What is the major difference between mentoring and coaching?
I think that when you look at those two terms, that coaching oftentimes involves a group of people, but there is overlap. Coaching can involve more of a group of people, but when you become a one-on-one kind of a circumstance, I think the literature talks about it more as mentoring than actually coaching. But the two are very, very similar. You're actually right. Absolutely. Yes?
At what level do you start? Because if you don't start with top management believing in this, the other people below him will just go his way.
Did you hear that question? Okay. I love that question. And the reason is that it starts with you. It starts with you. Regardless of where you are in an organization, all of these principles start with you. You know why? Because each of you, even if not formally dedicated to being a position leader of some sort, you always have interpersonal issues to deal with in accomplishing problems and solving problems, right? And that if you take up that notion and you ascribe to the notion that you can't do anything because our president doesn't do that, well, then you wait until you get a new president and you miss out on that self-development. I think the main notion here is how do you develop yourself, fitting into that organization and helping to move it forward. But without the support and encouragement, it's more difficult. Right. Good question. Good question. Any others? Okay. I think that is about it, but I want to do one thing. I want to thank a couple of people. 3 people? Not him. Not him. Not him. Not him. There are 3 people in here who took this project from vision to reality. How many people can have a vision for something and then turn it into something real? That happened here. When I got a call from Jackie Brito, and Jackie said, I think I know what we should do. And we need to do 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I said, well, if you think we should, we can try it, and we'll see what happens. Eva, wonderful job in trying to actually deal with me, I guess, more than anything. At 8 o'clock, well, what's the data? Where are we going from here? And so forth. Where's Joanna? Joanna is the marketing point for me. I just sort of listen to what she does and says, and that's what I do. And I want to thank the 3 of you. I'd like for you to give them a hand right now. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to get the answer to one question, just with a show of hands. How many would like to do more of this at Crummer? These kinds of workshops? Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. I would also like to introduce Tom, who's going to close this out. And thank you, Tom, for your support. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you. We are so honored to have a wonderful professor like Dr. Certo, aren't we? Nice round of applause. He's a wonderful part of Rollins College and the Crummer School, and I have to tell you, I've been a nervous wreck sitting there. I made it through the hour. He didn't call on me. I didn't have to talk into the microphone. At least in his class, there's a desk, and I can crouch before he calls on me. It's been a wonderful audience, too. Great questions. I did want to let you know, because of the Edith Bush Charitable Foundation, we were able to establish a Dr. Sam C. Certo Scholarship Fund for Wiser Leaders. And we're very excited about that. And I wanted to announce tonight also that Sam is taking a portion of the proceeds of the book to help fund the scholarship, too. So great cause. It'll live on. It's part of the principles of giving back and helping others, and it'll continue for students from forever. So it's really wonderful to have that. Also, Sam will be outside here to answer more questions and sign your books. And so if you were out here purchasing a book, and understand tonight, there's a 10% discount on the books too. So take advantage of having the author here, get the signature. They're just going to go up in value, especially after reading them, put your notes in them. So thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure to host you here tonight, and we look forward to having you back for more events like this, Sam. To the family, thanks for supporting Dad. Thanks for supporting your husband, and it's been wonderful to be able to work with him. I've only been back 3 months, but what a great team of people we have here back at Rollins Graduate School. Thank you, and have a great evening.